Okay, so we are today doing Lamed Hey and Aleph, but we are in Lamed Daled and Beis by the beginning of the widest line. Says the Gemara, Amar Chia Bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol HaNeviim Kulam Lenisnabu Ela Lemesi Bitul Talmid Chacham. All of the prophets, all of the things that they said, the nevuahs about the future, the greatness that will happen in the future times. This is for somebody who's going to marry off his daughter to a Talmid Chacham. It's a pragmatio Talmid Chacham, somebody who's going to be doing business with a Talmid Chacham, and somebody who will be helping a Talmid Chacham out in their own business or with his possessions. But actually, what a Talmid Chacham will get his own reward. No one has ever can imagine that that we've done for those who wait for him. That is to say, that all of the regular prophecy that we have written in the Tanakh, that is for good people, salt of the earth. They marry the daughters of Tamil Chachamim, they help support Tamil Chachamim, but Tamil Chachamim themselves are way beyond that. You just know the Gemara Pesachim test tells us that ideally a person should, when he's looking to get married himself, should look to marry a daughter of a Talmid Chacham. But this Gemara here is utilized in Ksubas Kufir Aleph for a fundamental point. The fundamental point is that and it's also a sifrei, that we have a mitzvah that appears a number of times in the Torah. The mitzvah to be mistavik with the Rebbeinu Shalom. This mitzvah is not understood in a literal way. If you look at the Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs, Mitzvah Vav, Rambam Des, Perek Vav, Rambam tells us there, based upon the Sifrei, based upon the Gemara in Subas Kafir Aleph, Hashem is the Eish Eichla. How could you be mistavik with the Rebbeinu Shalom? Elamai, how do you cleave on to the Rebbeinu Shalom? What you do is you cleave on to the Talmid Chachamim, and you help them out. And the Gemara literally gives these exact examples as the way to show how one is able to mistavik with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Rather, what do you do? You marry off your child to a Talmid Chacham, you help a Talmid Chacham with his parnasa, then such a person is going to be Mekayim L'Davka Bay. This is not necessarily the simple reading of L'Davka Bay, what the mitzvah is, and it's an interesting point to further discuss another time. I once made the argument that the first time the Torah uses the word Dveikus, and maybe the first time the Torah uses certain words, of Tzadik, the Gemara Bava Kama, and the test, the more it tells us about the idea, the first time a certain word is used, that has an emphasis on the word. The first time the word Dveikus is used in the Chumash is, of course, with one's wife. And so that might be another method to become close to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but we will not be able to discuss more now. Here's the Gemara. Amar Rav Chia Bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol HaNeviim Kulam Lenisnabu Ali Ma'aseh Mashiach. So Rav Chia Bar Abba says that all the Nevi'im, they were prophesying only for the future times. But what will be in Olam Haba? Remember the difference between Olam Haba and Yemei Mashiach. So all the prophecies that we have in Tanakh, that's all with regards to Yemei Mashiach. But Olam Haba, that Ayin Lo Yiras Lakim Zulasecha, that we have no idea what that is. That's going to be way beyond. We go to Shmuel. Amar Shmuel in Ben Olam Hazel Yemei Mashiach Al Shibu Malchus Bovad. And there's already disagreement with Shmuel. So Shmuel says that this Yemei Mashiach is not going to be any difference between currently, except for Shiba Malchus. The reason that that's relevant is because, for example, we find in Yeshaya that the lamb is going to be the Garz Evim Keves. The lamb and the sheep and the wolf, they're going to be lying down together. The cow is not going to be lying down with the bear, the lion. Like, so there's already a huge machlokes Rishonim. What does that mean? Does that mean there's going to be a change in teva, that the carnivores are now going to be herbivores? Some want to say that. Others want to say it's more metaphorical. But the way Shmuel is learning, Ein ben el mazeh l'Moshe Mashiach el shibun malchus bilvad. There will be no difference in the world. You have to understand all of these things as metaphors, not as literal, because Moshe Mashiach is not going to be any different than Bisman Hashem. And what's his proof? There will never be a dearth of poor from the earth. That is to say, even in Moshe Mashiach, there'll be hierarchies, rich people, poor people, and the like. That's not changing. The Nevi'im weren't talking about fundamental differences. Therefore, one needs to um, uh, understand these things in a more metaphorical kind of way. Or maybe Shmuel would agree that these things are more about Olam Haba and not Yemot HaMashiach. Either way, the Rambam in the end of Mishnah Torah adapts this idea of Shmuel that in Ben Olam Hazeh Yemot HaMashiach El Shiba Malchus Bavad, that there won't be any differences. It'll be fundamentally the same as we have here in this world, except for the fact that the galus will end for the Jewish people. Here's the Gemara. All the prophets, all the prophecies, what that was talking about was for Bala Tshuva. But for tzaddikim, they'll be way beyond all the good things that it says in the prophecies. That obviously is not talking about the tzaddikim, because the tzaddikim are way, way beyond that. This is the Machlekes Rabbi Avo. The Amar Rabbi Avo, Malkim Shebal Yeshuva Oimdim Tzadikim Gemurim Einam Oimdim. The Rabbi Avo holds that wherever, this became a very famous line, that wherever the Bal Yeshuva are standing, no tzadikim are able to stand. Even tzadikim Gemurim can't stand there. Why? Because the Bal Yeshuva are greater. Shinamar, what is the proof of Rabbi Avo? Right, interesting to know Rabbi Avo's argument on his Rebbe here, Rabbi Yechanan. So what does Rabbi Avo say? Shalom, shalom, larachiv v'lakarev, larachiv b'reish v'had l'karev. Right, Rabbi Avo's idea that it's going to be the Baal Tshuva are greater than the tzaddikim. So he learns that from the pasuk that we've already had. Now we understand why we're bringing down all these series of Gemaras. It comes back to this idea of Bar Nifs Vasayim, right, that we had for Chanim and Taisos. Now we come back to it. Shalom, shalom, the Rachav V'lakarev. What do you mean? Are you going to say it's going to be peace for the Rachig and the Karev? The Rachig Bereisha V'hada l'Karev. So the pasuk is talking about the Baalei Tshuva. We're not even talking about the tzaddikim. That means to say that when Hashem is talking about Marnus of Vasayim, Shalom, shalom, Rachav V'lakarev, Amar Hashem V'fasiv, that is dealing with the Baalei Tshuva because the tzaddikim are not able to stand in mechitzas and they're not able to reach that level. But Rabbi Yechanan disagrees. Rabbi Yechanan Amalach my Rachig, Shu Rachim Midvar Avera. Don't understand Rachig that he was a Rachig from Hashem. Understand that he was a Rachig from Midvar Avera. Shu Rachim Midvar Avera Meikar. My Karv Sheikar was Midvar Avera. Venice Rachig Mimenu. And it's just talking about just about tzaddikim. Somebody's Rachig from Avera. And what's a Karv? Someone was a Karv towards Midvar Avera, but he was in this Rachim and he never violated anything, he never sinned. So you have here a fundamental machlekes between Bavo and Rabbi Yechanan about who's greater, a Baal Tshuva or a tzaddik. I should note that the Marsha here takes away the umph of this Gemara, because the Marsha writes that he says the whole thing is very strange. The left from the Marsha is that it's all very strange. Maybe read it inside the language of the Marsha. Marsha here says the lashon of the Marsha is it's a very odd thing. That there should be a bigger maila for the Bali Tshuva over the Tzadikim Gemurim. Time was that people have tried to explain this. I'm going to tell you my opinion. That what does Rabbi Yechanan say? My carb shekar with varver and Deloy ari bechet varver aver b'poil. Them kain lo have a car like carb with varver. Elo the ratzlam shekar lefi machshav te lavar avera. Regav al yitzar v'leavar. Ainu bal tshuva machshav te shechoshev lavar avera. Devade bazeh. Shegav al yitzar v'leosa avera savar bavod yesh lo mali yisrael al tzadikim gemurim. Shalahaya behen hasasas yitzar. Cloud, like careful love here. Rabbi Yochanan said that Afal Pikain, Tzadikim Gemum Yesh Lamali Yiser, Shleichatu Cloud, Gabi Machshava, Ain't Kain Zakar B'Dvar of our Mias Machshava. Right. So what is the Marsha arguing? Marsha is arguing that according to Ravo, Baal Tshuva here is not somebody who literally sinned. Baal Tshuva is somebody here who had a machshava to sin, and he didn't end up sinning. And Rabbi Yochanan is talking about somebody. So the disagreement between them is not something actually ever because of course they're not going to stand like near a tzaddik gomer. But rather, what we're talking about is a situation where a person, the machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, is a person who has desires to sin. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, the tzaddik gomer is greater, right? Somebody who's such a perfect person that doesn't have the heart to do sins. Whereas according to Rabbi, the person who was challenged that he has the heart to sin, then he is a higher level, but he doesn't sin than the tzaddik who never had an avera. Somebody's tkunas hanefesh is such that he never has to sin, so such a person is not at the higher level. That's where the machlekes is. This reminds you of the Tanya in the beginning of Tanya, where the Baal Tanya writes. He's talking about his sefer. It's called Sefer Abeinani, and he makes the argument that the Beinani he's discussing is not somebody's mechza. Rather, a Beinani is somebody who has not even an avera. He's never doesn't even have Vittel Torah. So what's a Beinani? So he has the Yetzer. Still has the Yetzer around. That's a Beinani. When you have machlokes like this, the way the Maharsha is making out, there's no room anymore for regular folks, where everybody sort of has sins. But okay, this is how the discussion is. It happens to be a very profound argument, and one that, if it's understood literally, before it's saying that about Tshuva is greater than a tzaddik, he is making a very fundamental and profound point, and that a very fundamental and profound point. I don't have time to discuss now, but that does lead to the fundamental difference between Yosef and Yehuda, right? That Yosef, Mashiach ben Yosef, the whole trait of Yosef of never sinning, no matter what the odds are against it, no matter how challenging the place is, you're always the oil that rises on top of the water. This Amidah of Yosef, it's also a midah that most people cannot reach. But not only that, there's a level that is attained by Yehuda, by tzadka mimeni, by sinning, by having a fall, a lapse, and then turning it around. That becomes Yehuda, that becomes David, that becomes Mashiach ben David, and that is ultimately why Mashiach ben David is the one who's able to bring the Gula. Mashiach ben Yosef ends up failing in the mission, because there is something that is Ravo is onto something here, in the simple sense that Mokim Shaval Shuva Aimdin Afil Tzadik Gemurim, they're not able to stand there in that chitza. Finish the Gemara. Says the Gemara. So hashta my ayin lairasa. So the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean ayin lairasa? That gives us zakam. Rabbi Shimon Levi. This is the wine that has been watched over since the beginning of time, recorded time. What is Shimon Achmani disagrees? Says, what is Ayin Le'Rasa? The eye has not seen this. This means this is a reference to that no eye has seen Aiden. When it's the Gemara says, what do you mean? No eye has seen Aiden? What about Adam Rishon? Shematem Adam Rishon Nechan Haya Began. Where was Adam Rishon? You're gonna say it was in the Gan. Shematem who Gan, who Aiden? Maybe you're gonna say Gan Aiden. That's where Adam Rishon was. Isn't that all the same? Says the Gemara, no, that's not the same. Amalam Benar Yotze Me Aiden Lahashkes as Hagan. Gan Lechod ve'Aiden Lechod. The river, the Nahar, left Aden to go water the Gan. That shows you that Aden is one thing and Gan is another thing. So, Vayita Hashem Gan me'Aden mikadem, Vayasam Sham as Adam Asher Yatzar. Sounds like, right? Vayita Hashem Kim Gan be'Aden mikadem, right? So it sounds like it's the same, but the more saying no. Look at the pasuk. The pasuk is v'nahar yotze me'eden lahashkes es hagan. Sounds like they're different things. So Adam was, able to be in one place with Nagan, but he didn't see Eden, and that is what it means. Ayin le'ras l'kim, and no one has appreciated that until the end of time. Says the Matana Rabbanan, Ma'aser shechala b'nai Shov Gamliel. So this goes back to our Mishnah. There's a story where the son of Rabbi Gamliel got sick. So Shoga Shnei Talmidei Chacham Eitz Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa Levakish Olav Rachamim. So the Rabbi Gamliel sent two Talmidei Chachamim to ask Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa to daven for his son. So Kevin Shara Isam Allah Aliyah. Once he saw them, he went up to the attic. The more is not clear. Did he go up to the attic to daven for Rabbi Gamliel's son because they told him the message? Presumably they told him, but it doesn't say. Um, um, but here he's not. It's interesting because you have a similar Gemara if you look in Tanis called Gimel. But the Gemara has a whole story over there about Abba Chilkiah. So Abba Chilkiah, the rabbis came to talk to him to daven for them for lack of rain, and over there the Gemara makes it clear that it was a whole procedure, right? It was a whole story. They met him in the field and he ignored them, and then they followed him to his house, and basically he ends up going upstairs to the attic, him and his wife, without ever talking to the rabbis, and it starts raining, and he comes down and says to the rabbis, "No, so why are you here?" So we came to ask for the rain. He says, "Oh, you see the rain came. You didn't even have to ask me. Amazing." They say, "You didn't fool us." But we have a bunch of questions to ask. And they proceed to ask him, why is it that you didn't notice in the field? And why did your wife come out so dressed nicely? And why this? And why that? And why did your wife get answered first? All the questions they had for him. So in that story, it's clear that he tried to daven without taking any credit for it. Over here, it's mashma that if they didn't ask him, but he certainly would seem that they asked him because he came down and talked to them about what had happened, as we'll see in a second. I should also just mention that you notice that he went up to the roof in this case as well, as the story there in Tainus of Abba Chilkiah was going up to the roof, even though you might say normally we said the Gemara before that it's Yar Lifnei HaTeva, a person's supposed to be going down when they daven. You go down to the depth. And as I mentioned before, in all the European shuls, you go downwards to the Amud. Not all, but maybe a lot of them, certainly the older ones. So that is certainly true, but nevertheless, if the person is going to have a better hisbodedus, a better tefillah, and they're climbing up, so that's obviously permitted as well. Continues the Gemara. So, excuse me. So, the two Talmidei Chacham came, who were sent by Rabbi Gamliel to ask Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa, who is obviously a big miracle worker. People know him. He wants them to ask him to daven for a son. So Kevin Shiroi, once he saw them, he went up to the roof. Ubikesh Lav Racham, and he davened. When he got down, he said to them, L'chu, shecholtzosei chama. He says, go, because his fever is broken. So it seems, that's why I'm saying, it seems to me, that presumably they would have asked him. If they hadn't asked him, that would be pretty balagayvidik to go daven, then come down and say, he's better. That, that would kind of like be, defeating the purpose. Of him not waiting to ask them, then tell him that he knew exactly what was going on. That would be almost too much. So I would impute over here that they in fact asked him to daven for Gamliel's son, whereas in the situation of Abba Chilkiah, it's clear that the whole Gemara is based upon the fact that he did not speak to them, and he tries to take away any possible yasher koach that he would be entitled to for davening for them. Okay, so that is the Gemara. So they said to him, how do you know? Are you a prophet that you know that his fever is broken? He says, I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet. But this is what I have a tradition. I know that if I say it's tefillah and it works, it comes out smooth. I know it's mekabel. And if I am not able to get it out clearly, then I know smoothly. Then I know that it's maturv, that it's going to be sort of like ripped up, that it's not going to be accepted. Yash v'kasu v'kivns knew Isashah. They sat down and they thought about it and tried to figure out the exact time. These are people who didn't have watches; they had to figure out the time. So Gamliel says that's unbelievable. Avoid is like a swear, but it's a little oath. Like I can't believe it. right? That you're literally exactly right. Nothing is off from what you just said. At that moment that you're saying that the time was that Chanin Badesa told you that it was the fever was broken, that's when the fever was broken, and he asked us for some water to drink. Another Meister B'chinim and Deis, he went to go study by Yechanan ben Zakkai. V'chol ben Ishel B'Yechanan ben Zakkai, and B'Yechanan ben Zakkai's son got sick. So Amalek, I need a b'ni, B'ikesh Lav Rachamim, V'yeche, so he asked B'chinim and Deis to dam for a son. And Niach Rosh ben Birkav, here he doesn't go up to a roof. Here he puts his head between his knees, which also reminds us of the Gemara about the Zer Yudzayin, right, about the Master Elazar ben Derdai, after all the sins that he does. He asks the sun, the moon, right, the stars, everybody to intercede on his behalf, and nobody's willing to do so. He says, they can't, they have to worry about themselves. So he says that the Dover Tala Elabi, I have to be the one who takes care of this issue. Nobody else who can come along and help me. And so, what is what does Elazar ben do? He puts his head between Birka, he puts his head between his knees, and until he passes away. So in this case, I don't know what the difference is. Why the last time he goes on a roof here, he puts his head between his knees. In any event, this is what he did. And he and the son lived. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. El Moli Tiach ben Zakkai es Rosh ben Birkav Kol Hayom. Kuloi Loi Hoyu Mashkichem Alav. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said about himself that if I had put my head between my knees a whole day and I would have davened a whole day, nothing would have happened. Nobody would be listening to me. So Amr Ishta, his wife said to him, Chanina Gadol Mimecha? Is Chanina ben Daisa greater than you? Amr Lav. Not that he's greater than me. Elahu Daimek Eved Lifnei HaMelech. Vani Daimek Esar Lifnei HaMelech. There's a difference between us. He's like an Eved by the king, and I'm like a minister by the king. So Rashi explains, what does it mean an Eved Lifnei HaMelech? An Eved Lifnei HaMelech is a ben bias. He's a Yetziv Nechnas. He's always coming, going Shalei Bershus. So he's able to speak to me. He's able to speak to Rebbeinu Shalom all the time. But I'm like a Sarlaf Nemach. I'm like a minister. I have an appointed time to come see the king during the work hours. I'm not invited at any time to come to see the king. So therefore, since I am not, in that sense, always welcome, so it's not. I can't just daven like this. I'll be ignored. But he's always around. He's always a part of the family, as it were. He's always able to daven and get a response. The last Gemara, the Gemara says, a person is only supposed to daven in a room, in a home, in a shul where it has windows. Again, it ends up coming to halach about 12 windows, but the reason for the windows, says Rashi, is because it will cause a person to have kavanah. Why? Right, he'll look around at the heavens, and he will be humbled. He'll see the great vistas, the wonderful views, and he'll be humbled to daven for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Of course, it could also be a distraction. So presumably, we're talking about a situation where somebody's able to be inspired by the windows, and that was the idea, that you look out the windows, somehow you go out into the field, you go into the open. If you can't go into the open because you're in a room, but you look out into the open, you look at the wide expanse of the heavens, you get inspired to dive into the Rebbeinu Shalom. So continues the Gemara. So you're supposed to dive in a shul that has windows. Right? By Daniel, it says that there were windows in his attic, Negative Yerushalayim, where he was davening. Amar Rav Kahana, Chotzif Alai Man Demasli Beviksa. Once we're talking about a place where pure persons are daven, Rav Kahana says the chutzpah, somebody who's daven in a biksa. What's a biksa? So Rashi explains that a biksa is a bika, a valley. Davening in a valley is a chutzpah. What do you mean davening in a valley is a chutzpah? So Rashi explains Shikshub Makim Tznias Chal Lav Emes Melech. Right? V'li by Nishbar. When a person's in a quiet place, then he's going to feel God's presence. His heart will be broken, and he'll have the requisite kavanah. What does it mean? That means that somebody who's davening in a biksa is not feeling that. Why not? Presumably because this biksa, whatever it is a place where there's going to be people. Look at Taisvis. The Taisvis says, "Chotzef alayman the matzah v'viksa v'imtam v'akshav v'yetzi yisrael suach basad l'fnei sar." The Taisvis asks, "I don't understand what's wrong with davening in the valley. What's wrong with davening in the fields?" Yisrael Avinu already did that. This is what became our source earlier on Chavav. The Ensicha Tefillah, or Tefillah Lanikiyatay, L'fnei Hashem Yishbech Sichai. The whole idea of davening mincha, we learned that from Yitzchak, and this took place in a field. So what do you mean that this is a problem? It's a chutzpah, somebody does it. The husband married Maria. And I mean, Rebsach Berg Isha. Like Yitzchak Shekar Stada, Inami Bixi the Hacha married Bebika B'Makim Sheregilan Sham B'nei Adam Lav B'Halchei Derachim. That gives two potential answers. One is maybe there it's Har Maria, so that's a special exception. But then, but again, why would that be a special exception? Many people go out into a field. Pash Pshan and Pasuk is not that Har Maria who goes out into a field. We know certainly in Jewish tradition there were many Kabbalists, etc., who go out and daven in the field. So what would be wrong with that? The second answer deals with that. The second answer is, look, maybe this biksa or this bika had a lot of people going there. There's a lot of halchei derachim, so you're not having a lot of kavanah. Since you're not having a lot of kavanah, that's why you shouldn't be davening there. But it's not a vort in the bika, not a vort in a valley. That is not fundamentally a problem at all. It is the Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, "Chotzef alay man mefarish chatzah." Rav Kahana says that big chutzpah, somebody who explains, somebody who's mefarish their sin, somebody who elucidates their sins, the chutzpah. Shenemar Ashrin Asli Pesha Kisar Chatzah. Right, praiseworthy is the one who covers up his sins. The Rambam actually in Nefesh Tshuva says that the Rambam makes a chiluk between situation of a person that is doing ben adam chaver ben adam l'makayim. Person who's doing ben adam l'makayim, then those are the kind of sins you keep quiet. Those are not the sins that you broadcast, but a sin that you do with other people, against other people, right? Ben adam chaveri sins. So then those you could take sort of self-flagellation, make those public, and take the umbrage, take the pain of having that be known by everybody. Taisus explains, what does it mean, kisui chata, to hide the sin? So the last Taisus is the time of l'fisha azmas b'ayshal chata, because then I'll be very embarrassed. But if he's going to explain it, then it's like he doesn't have an embarrassment. If you know the skeletons in your closet, and you have what to be embarrassed about, when everybody knows about it, because you're the one broadcasting it. In psychology, they have these term, right, about sort of embracing it, right, and owning it. But if you own it in a manner which now everybody hears about it, you effectively are lowering down the amount of shame that you're carrying with you. When you're always walking around not sure if somebody else knows what you did, so then you feel very embarrassed, very humble. But if you own it, you get up there and say, "I have done this, this, and this." Wow. So there's no more shame. In fact, you're effectively making it and tantamount to being kosher. It's quite a modern idea. So, and like I said, the Rambam says that when it comes to Ben Chavera, there is to the contrary. There's praiseworthy is nobody who's going to make that public, because of course it happened with somebody else. Other people know about it already by definition, because it's the Ben Chavera Avera. We said already before in Yud Beis, someone does the Dvar Avera and he has a busha, they are going to forgive him right away. The predicates of Mavarchim. I just wanted to mention that I forgot to mention yesterday on the bottom pages before we move on Lamedal Amanal, the bottom pages of Malamdanai says Shalay Yishka, that a person should bow at the beginning and the end of the first bracha, the beginning and the end of Haidah. So we pointed out that we pointed out that Taisa said, question, what's the difference of the guy bowing down? Who cares? Let him bow. He wants to bow down more. Let him bow more. Why are we so worried about this person? Taisa gave an answer. Right, so we don't want to be a free for all that the Chacham say you one thing and you do something else. Right, so everybody's being machmer the way they want. Then can takanas Chachamim, and then you don't have a real takanas Chachamim anymore. V'chashinan liyara. So the Bach points out that this is a second answer. V'oid chashinan liyara. This is a situation where now we're going to also be suspecting this person of having too much yuara, of having too much gaiva. So what does it mean the second answer of having too much gaiva? I thought I should note, and what I forgot to mention yesterday, that this, to me, the way I encapsulate this Taisvis is a story of Navardik. In the Yeshiva Navardik, Navardik is very different than Slomodka, very different. All these places each had their own approach. Navardik's approach was essentially not the godless Adam like in Slomodka, but the katnus Adam, person's a nobody. And so the new Bracha comes to the yeshiva, and he sits down there in the yeshiva, and he's listening to everybody about the Musar Seder, and everybody's saying, "Ich bin garnished, ich bin garnished." So the new boy starts saying, "Ich bin garnished, ich bin garnished," and the older Brachot say to each other, huh, "Look at the chutzpah of this young kid. He thinks he's a garnished." Over here, what is the idea of a person who wants to bow down? Older Brachot Shemana Esrei. Why does he want to bow down so much? What did Rashi say on the top of Amud and base? Rashi said, explaining by Karin Gadol, Kol Mashu Gadol B'Yeser, whoever is greater than his neighbor. So Tzarich Lachniel Lashpil Atzmai. The greater a person is, the more they have to machnia himself. And that's why a regular person bows 4 times Shemana Esrei. But the Karin Gadol is going to be bowing down Kol Bracha, but the Seif Kol Bracha, V'Amelech Chilas Kol Bracha, V'Seif Kol Bracha, or maybe the whole time. Why? Because he's the king. The king needs to be the most humble. So when you're going to be bowing down by all the brachos, wants to know, well, what's the big deal? The one is the issue about listening to the rabbis. Okay. But there's a second issue of yura, there's a second issue of ego. You think you're so great that you need the bowing. Who do you think you are that you need so much bowing? You don't need so much bowing. Fine. So how do you know? Then Ketzam Avarchem. New parak. Says the Mishnah. Ketzam Avarchem al Paris. How does one make a bracha on Paris? What do you mean? What is the assumption in this Mishnah? The assumption in this Mishnah, you have to make a bracha before you eat. We're going to have to come to that and explain. How do you know that you have to make a bracha before you eat? We know bracha you have to eat, at least with regards to filling yourself up. Right? V'savata uve'rachta. So we know there's a bracha for sure after. It's a daraisa. So we're going to have to understand, how do you know that there's a bracha before you eat? When it comes to making a bracha on things that grow from the tree, so you make a bar pri eitz chutz min gefen. But wine, you don't make a regular bar pri eitz. There you make a special bracha of bar pri gefen. Paris aretz on fruits of the ground. What's the difference in Elon? What's the difference in Elon eitz and the aretz? It's a question of there might be areas where we have questions on this in terms of where things grow, but fundamentally something that grows on a tree, something that grows near the ground. Something that grows near the ground we call it Paris Haaretz. And on those kinds of things, fruits from the ground, you make a Ha'adama. Except for what? Bread. Bread, which grows from the ground, wheat, things of that sort. That you don't make a Ha'adama, that you make a special bracha. And on vegetables, again, what's the difference between a yarek and a peris? Clearly, they also understood the difference between sugar content and not such high sugar content. There's a difference between the two. On yarakos, on vegetables, you make a hadama. So that would be the same bracha as the peris haaretz. However, Buddha disagrees. Buddha says no. Buddha Emer Bari Mine Desham. You make bracha on Hakadosh Baruch Hu, create all these various different vegetative growths from the ground. Rashi tells us, what does it make case of Mavarch Chutz Min Hayayin Shemitoich Hashivusai Kavulei Bracha LaAtzmai V'Chein HaPas. Bread and wine get specific brachas because they are very special. We'll have to see more about their specialness later. Bari Mine Desham. Why does the Yehuda say there's a separate bracha for Peres Haaretz from Yerakos? Why doesn't it just simply say Bar Adama? Says the Rashi, Lefi sheyesh b'chal piyur adam and the sham zram kidneys for Rabbi Huda boy heker bracha l'chol minumin. Rabbi Huda tries to be more specific as it relates to each and every bracha. So the Gemara asks, we know immediately, how do we know that there is such a concept that you are required to make a bracha before you eat? The Tanur Rabbanan, because it says, the Brachot tells us, Kodesh Hilul Mashem. But the Pasuk tells us about Neter Ravai, that the fourth year, you're going to eat the stuff, you're going to eat it in Yerushalayim. So the Pasuk tells us it's Kodesh, Hilulim Lashem. What's the language of Hilulim? Like Hallel, like it's very special. It's like praising the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it doesn't say Kodesh Hallel Hashem. It's Hilulim. It's mashma. There's like two Hallels. So that's teaching us Melamed Shetu'unim Bracha Lefnei Mulachreim. That this teaches us that you need to make a bracha both before you eat something and after you eat. It says Rashi. You need two praises for Hashem when you eat. When you are eating these fruit in the fourth year, when it's mutter b'achila, two times, one before you eat the thing, that's then you make the first halal, which will be a bracha, and the second after. From here, Rekiva learns that it's also for a person to taste anything before he makes a blessing. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Slow down. You want to tell me that Kodesh Shilum Hashem is coming to teach you that there's a mitzvah to make a bracha or halacha, a requirement to make a bracha before and after you eat something? The high Kodesh Shilulim la'achi da'asa. This is what it means. Kodesh Shilulim is coming to teach you the halachas of brachas. Hai me'boyle echad damar achmana achle v'hadar achle v'idach davar tan shir tan chilul. V'she'ena tan shir and tan chilul. What does it mean? Says the Gemara, this Kodesh Shilulim Hashem is not available to teach you anything about brachas. It has nothing to do with brachas. What is Kodesh Hilul Hashem here to teach you? Kodesh Hilul Hashem is here to teach you two halachas as they relate to this topic. Says the Rashi, Hilulim Lashon Chilulim. Right, the word of Hilul is related to the word of Chilul. What does it mean to make something chulin? To make something profane from it being otherwise sacred, Kodesh. So we're learning as as follows, as Rashi explains. In order to eat this stuff, you need to first make it chol, you need to first make it chulin, and then you can eat it. How? You essentially redeem it, and al yidei pidyon you'll be able now to eat it without any issues in because you want to eat it now where you are and not have to take it to Yerushalayim. The other, the sort of halal could have been written in the singular or in as we have it plural. So the yim, the extra, the plural aspect of it is coming to teach you another one, which is shalai nembu teres revai ela bekarem. There's a big debate, as we'll see, between is it karem revai or is it netzah revai. So we're learning out shenemar kodesh shilulim davar she mahalim by ton chilul v'zel yain. So what do we mean when we say kodesh shilulim? The pasuk is not here to teach you anything about brachas. The pasuk is here to teach you laws that have to do with how you deal with netzah revai. Namely, that if you want to eat it outside Yerushalayim, you first have to be mechalel it, you have to be paided, and number two, that what is the kind of things that are going to require chilul? Where do you have the mitzvah of revai? You only have it on the kerem. You don't have it on the neta. So those are the two limudim that one is going to have from Kodesh Shilum Hashem. So again, if one is using it to teach you achle v'hadar achle, and the other one's using it to teach you davra tarn shira tarn chilul, but if it doesn't require shira, then it doesn't require chilul. So then it's not going to be available to teach you brachas. It's not going to be available to teach you need a bracha before or after you eat something. So how do you know that you only say shira on wine? In other words, how do you know that you're only dealing with karam ravai, not netzah ravai, and meaning any other fruits of trees? So here we have a very interesting pasuk. The context is a whole story there in Shoftim. Avimelech Gidon had 70 sons. He had one son of a Pelegish named Avimelech. Avimelech decided he wanted to be the king. Gidon himself refused to be the king, and he dies. Avimelech goes along, kills all 70 of his brothers, makes himself the king, and Gideon had one son, I think his name was Yosem, who escaped, and he goes up to a mountain and he starts saying the trees they were talking about becoming the king. Who should be the king? Should the Zayas be the king? Should the get everybody? And each one says, no, no. Why would I be the king to rule over other people? What am I? Until the thorn bush is the one who was willing to become the king. So that's the context there. And the pasuk tells us that that this boy said that Tamerlam and his marshal that he was giving the people that they're letting Abimelech be the king. He just killed 70 of Gideon's children. He says Vatarmalan Agefen, the vine said, as my wine, which makes people very happy, both God and man, is has it finished? That now I need to take on being a king. I'm happy as I am. So the Gemara Darshans, if he's able to be misameach people, but what about the Rebbeinu? Where do you see that the yain kaviyachol will be misameach Hashem? It doesn't make any sense. Because yain doesn't mean it's being misameach Hashem, but rather that we have a shira when it comes to wine. So for all practical intents and purposes, this was one long question, which gets back to our point that Kodesh Ilum Hashem is not available to teach you that you're learning out brachas before and after you eat. Rather, it's used to teach you that achle v'hadar achle, and you have to first be mechal before you eat the fourth year fruit, and that the only thing you have to do is for fruit where you have shira, which would be karam ravai. All right, we'll stop over here.